Hi, everybody!
Most games only wish they could achieve what Metaphor ReFantazio managed on its first day, that being 1 million copies sold. With the games industry at its peak in popularity at this point in time, releasing a brand new IP is a huge risk. I covered that in a previous Metaphor video on the channel. But in this case, Atlus's big gamble paid off, as I covered in my review for the game. It's a great skeleton from which to build off. So, what are the key items on my wish list? With the original Metaphor, we're given access to a Gauntlet runner, which really changed up the way the player goes about their day-to-day lives in-game, which certainly showed the potential of what Atlus could do in a Persona title if the characters are traveling between multiple locations within the narrative. So, my biggest wish is doubling down on this aspect a little bit more. With the original Metaphor, we could travel Uchronia more or less however we wished to, and the game was so big you'd need at least 2 playthroughs just to see everything. However, the Gauntlet Runner merely acted as a way to convey the vast distances you were traveling. You never really got to control it yourself. So, how would I implement and improve this aspect of the game? I'd like to see vast open areas we can use the Gauntlet Runner to explore. This would make the world found in the game feel far more organic, which is something we only got a very small taste of when we passed through small towns and villages on our way to dungeons or other larger cities. We can't explore these places or the surrounding area, which is something Atlus really missed out on. These areas could also be turned into a farming/grinding area akin to the Calm Lands found in Final Fantasy X. I'd also like to be able to control the Gauntlet Runner directly. Why does Nurus get to have all the fun? By giving the player control of the runner during these segments, this would really open things up further, and you could even have runner battles properly, which could work something akin to the tank battles found in the Valkyria Chronicles games. Again, just adding things to do within the game world. But okay, what else do I wish for with this sequel, since we know Atlus now considers Metaphor to be their third pillar, so it's just a matter of time before we see the next entry. For my second wish, I'd like you all to hit the subscribe button. Okay, that's not actually my wish. What I'd actually like to see is Atlus including some mini-games the players can partake in during times where you're traveling on the Gauntlet Runner. This is something The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 2 did exceptionally well, when you were between missions and using the Courageous as your base of operations. What players were allowed to do during that time was play a minigame called Blade 2, which was an evolution of the previous minigame called Blade found in the first Cold Steel. However, unlike the original iteration, you could play Blade 2 as many times as you wanted in one go, and I'll admit I do sometimes boot up Cold Steel 2 just to play a few rounds, but something like that would really break up some of the tedium one can experience with Metaphor at times. There are even some points we see the protagonist and Hulkenberg playing some variant of chess, so clearly board games and similar do exist in that world, so why not make them into a minigame? Admittedly, this one isn't too likely as minigames are very boom or bust. Players either love or hate them, and when they're bad, they're very bad. Minigames are also a dying breed, so seeing their inclusion is a rarity. Some would even argue we're no longer in the 90s and the need for minigames is long gone. Maybe I'll do a video about that topic in the future. So do let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that video. Also, while you're there, why not bring up something you'd like to see happen in Metaphor's sequel? Since we're on that topic, now might be the best time to transition into my third wish, as there was one glaring omission from Metaphor, which is found in every Persona game. This next part of the video will contain spoilers, so skip to the next chapter if you don't want the endgame of Metaphor spoiled for you. You have until the end of the Jeopardy music to skip ahead. Right, Now that those who don't want anything spoiled have skipped ahead, let's move on to discussing romance. This is something Atlus are going to have to include, since the protagonist is now the king of Uchronia. He's going to need to find a wife to ensure the realm remains stable, because otherwise, that's just inviting the realm to become unstable, given the world has devolved into essentially feudal society, even though the race for the crown may have somewhat reintroduced democracy to that world. Since Metaphor is potentially our world after some war had wiped out large swaths of the population, we know that humanity had transformed into the various tribes we see throughout our journey, thanks to one of the revelations in the last third or so of the game. But yeah, for the state the world is in, the new king is going to need to find his queen. This could even be a key plot point within the game itself, since there are probably other kingdoms out there along with other countries. By including the potential to romance one of their higher-ups could lead to some political intrigue and could have long-term ramifications based off your choices on Metaphor 3 and beyond if this turns into a long-running franchise. If an interconnected story is good enough for Trails, why can't it be good enough for Metaphor 2?
Tell me when I'm telling lies!
Also, if you do the social link with Yufa, it's heavily implied she might have feelings for the protagonist, so that's something one could explore in Metaphor 2. Is there anything else I hope for, though? We got a lot of classes, or as they're called in-game, archetypes to play with. Some were amazing, and some were frankly shit. So for my fourth wish, I'd love to see Atlus including more archetypes, and making the royal ones, which are supposed to be the cream of the crop variant for that character, actually feel worthwhile in pursuing. Because I just found the payoff of the royal archetypes to be absolutely disappointing. I mentioned that in my review for the game. Check that out by clicking the card appearing on screen now. But the archetypes, generally speaking, was one of Metaphor's strongest aspects since it just improved player expression significantly. Like I mentioned in my review, everyone I know who played the game ended up with different builds at different points in the game as we all tweaked and fiddled with the system until we found our ideals. That's what my penultimate wish was, so let's discuss my final one next. So, this is a nitpick I didn't mention within my review because this is more of a preference thing. I really wish Atlus had made the camera more zoomed out when you're exploring a dungeon and in action combat with enemies. I just found the camera way too zoomed in. I understand why Atlus went with this camera choice though, because it's supposed to convey a feeling of claustrophobia, but it just went a little bit too hard into it and made the game feel just a little less polished than it otherwise could have been. I can forgive some of the jank found within Metaphor, as it was Atlus's first attempt in almost 2 decades at making an action title, so some things were going to need improvement, which a sequel will iron out. Since the core theme of the first game was anxiety, I imagine the second will have a less zoomed in camera to convey the world as a more relaxed place. But what else would I like to see polished a little bit more? I'd like to see Atlus improve the lock-on and targeting system in combat. What we have right now is functional, but unlike something from Bethesda, it actually works. However, the way it's implemented is not as smooth as it otherwise should be, so Atlus can really improve the game by making the lock-on a little bit snappier. That, coupled with a more zoomed-out camera, would make for the perfect hybrid RPG. So is there anything you feel I missed in my wish list, and what would you like to see? If you've made it to this point in the video, hit the like button. Thanks go out to my channel members, whose names are on screen now. If you want to support this channel further and help the content improve, then hit the join button or the link in the description. Now check out my review for Metaphor, and until next time, keep blazing that trail.